And now a little bit about the process for the North Corridor study. Really, this study is what we call an alternatives analysis. And what that technical term really means is a process of answering some simple questions along with the community's help. And those questions are, when you really get down to it, what are the mobility problems in the North Corridor? What difficulties or challenges are people having getting around the North Corridor? The second question is, what's causing those mobility challenges? What's making it so difficult for you to get to where you need to go in the North Corridor? And then finally, what are our options for addressing those challenges? What could we possibly do about it? And then once we have all those options, and we also call them alternatives, what do each one of those options or alternatives cost? What do they get us? What are their benefits? And what are some of the barriers or constraints to actually making them happen? Once we collect all that information for each particular alternative or option, then we go through a process of actually picking one that we think is the best option or the best alternative for moving forward to actual project development. And that project is what we call the locally preferred alternative, or LPA, as the technical term for that. So these are just the very simple questions that really are the core of the North Corridor study, what we were trying to accomplish. So where were we trying to accomplish this? Well, the North Corridor, as we talked about, was the corridor from Georgetown, Round Rock, includes Pflugerville, North Austin, into downtown Austin. And one thing that you should know right off the top with a corridor study or any kind of planning study like this is that the public's input and guidance is essential for making sure that we get it right and making it a success. And throughout this process, we really sought out the opinions and the input from key community stakeholders and just everyday people in the North Corridor, and asked them continuously if we were moving in the right direction. One of the first things they told us was, hey, what about Hutto? It's such a fast-growing area. They're having trouble getting in and around the North Corridor. You ought to look at options for them as well. And also, there's a lot of growth that Hutto and Round Rock and Pflugerville all have planned along the SH-130 corridor. And so we were asked, again, almost immediately, you should widen your study area to include those particular places because we know they're going to grow in the future. And so we did. We responded by widening our study area to encompass Hutto and the SH-130 corridor. Initially, our study area only went as far east as this yellow line here, which is the old MoCan rail corridor, an abandoned rail corridor. So now the study area is essentially just here north of Georgetown, or North Georgetown, hugs Mopac on the west, goes down to Lady Bird Lake to the south, and encompasses SH-130 on the east. So it's a pretty large area with lots of mobility challenges. So that was the study area, and our process was a four-step process, or is a four-step process. In the first phase, we sought to work with the public to answer that first question. What are the challenges that you're facing getting in and around the North Corridor? But we also asked people from the very beginning, if we were to come up with a high-capacity transit solution or system for the North Corridor, what would you like it to be like? What would you like it to accomplish? And so we asked them what kind of attributes they would like to see out of their transit system. And then after we collected that feedback, and we'll talk about what we heard here in a second, we used that information along with technical data to develop those sets of choices for particular solutions that we could deploy here in the North Corridor to address the challenges that people face. We developed 12 initial alternatives based on what we heard in phase one, and then we worked with our project advisory group, which was chaired by Round Rock Mayor McGraw, but had representation from all the communities in the North Corridor, and they worked together to whittle those initial 12 alternatives down to 3, which we then brought out to the community. So in phase one, again, we were asking people, what are the challenges that you're facing and what would you like to see? And we heard lots of things from lots of different people, but there were some key themes, some common themes that emerged when we asked some questions. Again, first and foremost, they said you need to include the SH-130 and Hutto area in your study, and as I talked about at the very beginning, we did do that. They said you need to be sure you connect activity centers in the North Corridor, not just connect everything to downtown Austin, because people in Hutto need to get to Round Rock to go to work. people in Georgetown need to be able to get to Pflugerville. People in Pflugerville need to be able to get to Round Rock. So people didn't just need to go to downtown Austin, although that is important. They also needed to get among these other communities. So they wanted us to connect these centers to the extent possible. And you will see in all of the alternatives we took out to the public, we attempted to do that. People also told us to be sure that it was convenient to home and to work. So for example, they may work downtown. So if they took transit to downtown Austin, maybe once they were there, they could walk to their final destination, or they could take a connecting bus or ride a bike or something along those lines, because downtown Austin is very walkable, bikeable, etc. Well, that's not necessarily the case yet in some of these North Corridor communities. And so what people said, to make it convenient to them on that end of the trip, they needed to be able to access it in their car. And so what you'll see in these alternatives is a system of new and existing park and rides that will be utilized in these alternatives. People also told us they wanted to use SH-130 in some of the alternatives. Try to put some stuff in that corridor because it could, there's a lot of capacity currently on that corridor, and we've already got an asset on the ground. Let's try to use it if we can. So we did evaluate some alternatives that had projects running in that corridor. And then a very specific concern we heard from neighbors in Pflugerville, that abandoned Mocan freight rail line runs right through downtown Pflugerville. And there's a lot of single-family homes and schools that have kind of grown up over the years around that right-of-way. And there were some pretty serious concerns expressed about running any kind of high-capacity transit through Pflugerville, through those neighborhoods. And so we heeded those concerns, and none of our alternatives were there transit projects conceived to run straight through Pflugerville in that corridor. So we really tried to listen to what the community had to tell us. So then we moved in, we took that feedback again, we developed 12 initial alternatives using our stakeholder groups, our technical and project advisory groups. We whittled those down to 3, and we brought those 3 alternatives out into the community, and we talked about the ways that we would evaluate or compare these alternatives together. And we got a lot of feedback. We had a set of workshops throughout the North Corridor and heard a lot of great things. We took that information, and our project advisory group and technical advisory group then narrowed those 3 transit alternatives down to 1 proposed locally preferred alternative. Again, the best answer that we could come up with out of all the alternatives for addressing the challenges that we identified here in Phase 1 for the North Corridor. So we brought out these 3 alternatives. We had one that was called Connect, which was more limited in scope, probably the least expensive, could get it up and running the fastest, but probably would do the least amount to actually address the challenges in the North Corridor. You get what you pay for. So if you don't really invest, you're probably not going to get that much impact. The second one we called Express. It was a little bit more robust. It relied on express transit running in express lanes mainly, and so cost a little bit more, would take a little bit longer to get off the ground, but would have a bigger impact than the first alternative. And then finally, the third alternative, what we called high capacity, this had a bit of everything. Had extensions of our Metro Rapid service, had express service, also had Connect service. They had a lot going on in this particular alternative. Would be much more expensive, probably take a little bit longer to fully get off the ground, but would have the biggest impact. So based on the public input and the work done by our project advisory group and our technical advisory group, we whittled all of this down to what we call the locally preferred alternative. And so now we're in Phase 3. We're bringing out this proposed locally preferred alternative to you, the public, and we really want your input. Did we get it right? Do you think that this proposed set of projects for the North Corridor will meaningfully address the challenges that we identified together here in Phase 1? Again, connecting the centers, connecting them to the core, making sure that we consider fully the constraints that we face, providing alternatives to congestion, and accommodating the growth that we know is coming. So this is where we are in Phase 3. Once we hear back from you, any questions or concerns or the changes you'd like to see, We'll take all of that information, and our project advisory group and technical advisory group will weigh all that and maybe make a few changes and seek to finalize the locally preferred alternative, and also how we might pay for that together as a region. And once that plan is put together, then we'll bring it out to our regional and local governments and seek adoption of that locally preferred alternative by those bodies. And assuming that all goes well, then we can get into project development, where we actually start designing the thing, and then we get to building it and operating it and providing you with options to get around the North Corridor. So this is the draft North Corridor locally preferred alternative. So in the next section, well, first we'd like for you to leave some comments on the process. Do you think that this process that we followed was appropriate? Do you think that it's headed in the right direction? Let us know if you have any questions or concerns. And then in the next section, we'll get a little bit more into the North Corridor LPA, and would really like your specific comments on these proposed solutions for the North Corridor.